Hello, and welcome to this Fleet Europe webinar with the support of EuroFleet Consult. The webinar is called How to Find the Right Company Car for Your Fleet Customer. The information that will be given in this webinar is for information purposes only and is not intended as an offer. And also important is that no information that will be given during this webinar can be reproduced without the permission of Fleet Europe and EuroFleet Consult. My name is Steven Schroefs. I am the Chief Editor of Fleet Europe, and I have the pleasure to be, let's say, the moderator of this webinar today. Why have we chosen the topic of finding the right company car for your fleet customer? Because this can be quite a challenge in an evolving ecosystem where we have the rise of electric vehicles. We don't exactly know who fits a diesel vehicle anymore, and there is also the increasing attention for digital platforms. We can imagine that if you are a fleet manager, if you are a salesperson, if you are a car dealer, that it's not an easy task to decide which vehicle fits best to the profile of the company car driver you have in front of you. And so we thought it would be an excellent idea to take the next 40 to 45 minutes to go in detail and elaborate a little bit on how to right size, let's say, the company car for your fleet customer. It's not me who is going to give you all the expertise in this webinar. We have the pleasure that Mr. Wacht Martens, Managing Partner at EuroFleet Consult, is with us today. And so Wacht will detail a little bit what are the trends that he and his company are seeing when it comes to, let's say, the more complex offering that is there on the market. But more importantly, he will also deep dive in a possible solution for you to select and find the right vehicle for your customer. So if everything is right, then now Wacht can hear me, I think. Wacht, can you hear me? Hello, Wacht? Wacht?
Yes, Steven.
Okay, there he is. Wacht, thank you very much. Thank you for being with us. It will be a pleasure to know exactly how the industry can find the right company car for the fleet customer. And I believe that you and your company, you have an answer to that question. And so we are eager to know what the answer is. So it would be great that you can give us a little bit of insight in how we can decide on finding the right company car for our customers.
Well, thank you very much, Steven. Indeed, I will be happy to share with you some insights on a major project that we at EuroFleet Consult have been working on in the last few months. The project is called Car Cost Advisor. It's basically it is looking at a decision support tool for supporting the salesman in its dialogue with fleet customers. At EuroFleet Consult, since more than 20 years, we are serving manufacturers, importers, and dealers in training and coaching their fleet sales teams. We have over the last few years, we have really witnessed the complexity of choices for fleet customers, especially, but for the general public as well. We have witnessed the complexity of choices increasing dramatically. So this puts us for quite a few challenges that we've summarized in the next slide. Not only is it so that the variety of offerings, the variety of models in the different segments have increased. Also, the different engine types, the different types of hybridization, electrification, and so on have increased. And at the same time, regulation and taxations have evolved, and thus this impacts quite largely the total cost of ownership for the customer. We have referenced that also on the next slide, on slide number 10. which basically summarizes for us what really the reference point or the frame of reference for fleet clients has evolved to. When choosing a vehicle, it has become more complex than ever before to make a clear decision. So what we could say is that the reference point for sales customers has become very complex, very changing, very volatile, but in a way also uncertain. On the next slide, we could say that the fleet challenges that we face today are difficult to meet with the answers that we've been doing yesterday. I mean, only the choice in the past, the choice of engine types was relatively simple. When the mileage was low, there was more the tendency to evolve to petrol engines. When the mileage was high, the tendency was rather to evolve to diesel engines. This is not the case anymore, and especially the answers that we've been using in the past, namely rebate-based or product-based discussions in itself, they are not the right answer anymore. And therefore, on the next slide, we have illustrated that what our core belief is at EuroFleet Consult. We believe that the right answer for SMEs, but also for larger fleet customers, really lies in balancing out the real core elements of a fleet offering. This contains the vehicle, obviously. This contains also the different services around it, the mobility packages around it, all the F&I elements around it. And for a dealer, it is really important to balance all this out in a sustainable proposition that is, in our belief, is more H2H based, but is not really based on percentage of rebates. The real powerful solutions lies really beyond that. In the second chapter, which starts on the next slide, we illustrate how we see the service-minded approach becoming more and more important in the fleet business. We see that obviously the different levels of decision taking can vary between customers. They can vary obviously over the time, but also according to the client characteristics or to the maturity of decision taking within a fleet. On the next slide, we have illustrated just very simply, regardless of how you approach your total cost of ownership, your total cost of ownership is always largely dependent on the CO2 emission of the vehicle. As a reference point, we've taken Belgium. This is a sample calculation for Belgium, and here you see that over 30%, it's actually more in the area of 40% of the total cost of ownership is either directly related to the CO2 emission because it's related to the fuel consumption, or indirectly related to CO2 emission because in many markets CO2 emission plays a predominant role also in the taxation level. The taxation, it can obviously be very different from markets to markets. We do not only work in Belgium, we also work in France, we work in Italy, we work on the Luxembourg market, a little bit on the Dutch market and on the German market. On the next slide, we have illustrated the general structure that we see as framework for automotive taxation. There's basically three levels. You have taxation elements surrounding the vehicle, you have taxation elements surrounding the use of the vehicle, and you have taxation elements that can be laid upon the employer. Some of these taxes on import on employer level can be cash out taxes, or they can be taxes that are, well, as we call it, non-cash out, as they are related to the deductibility, the fiscal deductibility of the vehicle. On the next slide, we've detailed a little bit, well, the very specific complexity that we basically started upon when deriving the car cost advisor. We have witnessed that, well, in Belgium we have a taxation that is structured basically upon four fiscal tax profiles of the client, adding to that the different acquisition types, and adding also to that the different levels of VAT, of company car taxation, and so on. This has made it very, very difficult for one salesperson in the sales organization or the dealership to find a very clear and a very objectively calculated solution for the client. Today, we are doing this. On the next slide, you will see the picture of this. Today we're largely using old way calculations. I would say we're using the calculator, so the manual calculator, or we are referring to Excels that many of the salespeople have been establishing for themselves. I'm not saying that these are wrong in their essence, but especially when making a very clear and very customer oriented solution base, this becomes very difficult to scale. Taxation obviously evolves. Also, the CO2 emissions of the vehicles evolve, and this makes it obviously very difficult to keep all of that up to date. Keeping that up to date was actually one element that led us to developing a web application. The second element, obviously, that we wanted to create a system that would allow the salesman in the dealership really to focus as much as possible on the essence of his or her role, namely that is the human-to-human interaction with the customer, that being a small fleet customer or a larger fleet user. We wanted really to make sure that the core competence of the salesman would not lie in calculating or in using the calculator, right, or in using the Excel document, right, but in really offering a clear answer or a clear support of choice to the customer. And that's really how we what I want to illustrate in the next chapter that will start also on the next slide. So Celine or Steven, if you would like. Yeah, thank you very much. We will show you, or I will briefly show you here what our core philosophy behind the Car Cost Advisor is. We have developed Car Cost Advisor. Obviously, we went through different phases. We've been working on this since the last 18 months. We've been all very intensively working on this. Not only we here with our core team at EuroFleet Consult, we've also used taxation specialists in Belgium that reside in our team. We have a very powerful team sitting in the French market that has supported us in this as well. And for the IT development, because we're talking here about the web application, we're talking about the software as a service application. We have used very intensively the new partnership that we have with Macadam Europe since the first quarter of this year. So what we've tried to do with Car Cost Advisor is develop an application, a web application that runs on laptops and desktop computers, that also obviously runs in a very stable way on tablets. It is today already in rollout in the Belgian market. We have it live with approximately 400 salesmen that have started using it in different phases since October of this year. There's a management summary on the next slide, Steven, that really sums it all up in the most important topics. So what it is really, it's an open architecture solution that we have built. So it enables to create interfaces where needed with peripheral systems that could be calculating systems, that could also be configuration systems, and so on. There's a dedicated URL, obviously, behind it, also personalized login, and there is the possibility to display logos on screens and so on. Behind it all, I mean, this is a web application, but obviously we support this with a very strong framework of SLA. We have very strong and dedicated IT resources that support all this development. The whole development for us is done in an agile method, meaning that we are very responsive to the remarks, the suggestions of the clients, and it also makes it very flexible or easy for us to flexibly adapt to the changing requirements as far as the fiscal environment is concerned. It's a SaaS application, meaning that it's basically accessible from anywhere. In the next few slides, we have gathered together a few screenshots of the application in itself. So what we've tried to establish, our core philosophy, our core use case that we've been working on when developing the Car Cost Advisor was to make sure that we could support the salesman, being the salesman, the showroom salesman, being the fleet salesman, and also the LCV salesman in the dealership, that we could support them in a way that was as simple and as intuitive as possible to give their clients an advice when choosing between two vehicles. And that could be vehicles of different brands. That could also be vehicles with different engine types. That could, for instance, be the choice between a diesel engine and a petrol engine. It could be the choice between a diesel and a hybrid, and so on. Here on this slide, you see the illustration of what these different steps are. On the next few slides, you will see an illustration of each of the steps in detail. The first one is to select the driver profile. This is obviously dependent on the market where you work into. As I've been saying before, the main fiscal profiles, this is an example of the Belgian application that you see. The main fiscal profiles in Belgium, there are 4 different types, and behind that is an intelligence that basically calls up when selecting the main driver profile, that calls up the main fiscal elements related to that. In order to support the ease of use for the salesman, because that is the target group that we are working for, that we are serving with this application. What we do is we illustrate the most frequent answers to the different questions are highlighted with blue frames. Obviously, this is to save time. The possibility is always there to evolve from this and to choose a different option. I would like to first of all state that you are now looking at the screens in an English version. The application exists also in a Flemish variant, so a Dutch variant, in French, and the German language version is also ready to deploy. On the second screen, we dive into the acquisition method. The acquisition method, or the acquisition mode, which is basically determining largely in the Belgian fiscal environment, which is largely determining where the vehicle or what kind of company car taxes will apply, what the kind of taxe de mise en circulation, so what the registration tax will be, and what the yearly registration tax for the vehicle will be. I would also like to underline that Car Cost Advisor is a simulation tool for the usage costs of a vehicle. Car Cost Advisor is not a configuration tool, so we always start from an available quotation or an available configuration of a vehicle. That's number one. And number two, Car Cost Advisor is not a financial simulation tool, so we always start from an available financing or leasing calculation. We always evolve from that point onwards. In the third step, which is on the next slide, yeah, thank you. On the third step, this is what the screen looks like today. It will evolve in the next few weeks. It will further evolve. And here we are determining the content elements, I would say the more dynamic content elements, which is the start date of the calculation. Here it is the 1st of January 2020, and the yearly mileage, and then the ownership period, which is basically the calculation period that we will use. And the last one is the driving style. The driving style which we use to fine-tune the real fuel consumption of the vehicle. We always start from the homologation basis of the vehicle, so the norm fuel consumption of the vehicle, and then we adapt that either on a percentage base, or we can. The possibility is there to manually adjust this. One of the elements that we are further working on, and that will have an implication on this screen, is the is to fine-tune the consumption for hybrid vehicles and also for battery electric vehicles. These will be fine-tuned, but will have as an impact that here on this screen we will pose a few more questions in order to have a clearer profiling of the driver. The next slide will show the slides or the screens 4 and 5, which are well basically identical. What we have here is basically the screens where we select the vehicle data. Currently we source the vehicle data from the database of JATO. For the Belgian market, we have over 6,000 passenger car lines in it. Also for the LCV, because we also have the functionality for the light commercial vehicles included, which is a different fiscal environment in Belgium. For light commercial vehicles, we have over 5,000 lines of vehicle data that we source. Out of those vehicle data, we have on the top of each of the screens that you see, we have different filter fields that can be used in order to narrow down the different versions that can be selected. The exact version that is obtained, from that we retrieve, amongst others, the catalog price. The catalog price, which is the same starting point as also the leasing companies have in their calculation tool, and which is also the same data source as the configuration tools of the manufacturers are. Obviously, what we need in order to make the calculation right is to integrate the exact values of options, accessories, and the rebates. We can either work with or without VAT, and the VAT level is always determined by the fiscal profile of the client. At the bottom of each of these selection screens, what we integrate is obviously either the monthly leasing rate or the monthly financial payment that is made for the vehicle. The steps for vehicle A and vehicle B are identical. So that is steps 4 and 5. If you go to the next slide, please, Steven. What you see here is a highlight or a sample of the first result screen that we come down to. As I said, we have always been working on fine-tuning the use case of how can a salesman in the dealership give an easy or a simple or an efficient, in the most efficient way, give an overview or give an answer to the client that is hesitating between two engine types, two models, a model of a competitor, or eventually also replacing a vehicle, and so on. Doing this, or in order to do this, we work on different spaces. So what you see appearing on the screen is, you see, for instance, here we have two models that we've been comparing. You see the two vehicles in the one example in the left hand column there is an Audi A6 Avant. In the right hand column, I believe there is a BMW 5 Series Touring. You can display the results on a monthly basis, on a yearly basis, or on the total period. That depends on the choices that you click. And the first, on the landing page here, we display only the differences or the difference results. If the user wants to see more details of each of the fields, the possibility is there to click on the small icons and to then see really all the details of the calculation behind. For instance, on the level of budget, on the level of fuel consumption, the adjusted fuel consumption, the level of taxes, and the total cost, which basically is the TCO level 1, which is the cash out TCO. And then under that there's here in this case a green bar, which highlights that for the vehicle that is in the left hand column, there's an advantage on the TCO level 2. Now obviously the fiscal elements behind it, these can differ from markets to markets. We are currently finalizing the application for market readiness in France. In France, in the month of January, we will have we will have some fiscal changes that will integrate, or that will be needed. Obviously, those fiscal changes will require adaptation work. The advantage of a web application is that all the users can be guaranteed, because on a central level we monitor the different parameters of the fiscal system behind it. We also monitor the real prices of the fuels and the energy prices behind it. We monitor this on a bi-weekly basis. We update as well the vehicle database on a weekly basis. That obviously constantly evolves, and for instance, when CO2 taxes or the different fiscal elements, as we have it in Belgium on the regions, may be updated. That is something that on a central level the web application or the team behind the web application does, in order to make sure that all the users behind it have always up-to-date and very accurate calculations behind it as they are using it in order to give to their clients. The first result that we display is a screen result that can be saved, and on the next slide you will see an example of a printout that can be made available. The printout can be made available in different language versions, so in Dutch, in Flemish, in French, and in English version. It can be displayed either in a summarized way or in a very detailed way. We can make the calculations so that the fiscal deductibility of the different vehicles can be displayed in each of the years. We have, for information, also tested this quite extensively. We've been, I think, in total we have over 100 testing days that we have performed. One of the test groups that we also used was fiscal specialists, was accountants, because we are very aware that in many cases, when a decision is to be made about the vehicle choice, it is always, well, in many cases, it's also the accountant or the fiscal specialist behind the SME that has an important influence on the decision taking in itself. I believe that this sums it up for the application in itself. So if you go to the next slide, please. Yeah, thank you very much. There's the summary again of the essentials of the application. So Car Cost Advisor is in its essence is a tool where we at EuroFleet Consult have been working very hard on it. It materializes the knowledge of over 20 years of TCO and fiscal trainings that we have been doing in EuroFleet Consult. It materializes it in a way that is as intuitive and as easy to use as possible. The feedback that we have obtained from all the different clinics, test sessions, and also training deployments that we've been doing on the tool were all supporting us in a way that the tool is easy to use. The tool is pragmatic and allows really to answer the clients in a very simple, in a very effective way, in a way also that gives a lot of professionalism to the dealerships, and definitely in a way that completes the offering to the fleet clients for the salesman. So in a way that the very pertinent questions of the fleet customers when entering a showroom or when contacting a dealership, namely what kind of engine type do I have to choose, can really be met in a very concrete way, and not in a way that the argumentation is based on product or on technical elements of the product, but really in a way that is fact-based, that is as objective and as possible. Now, we are also realistic. We know that a tool or this kind of tool will never replace the strong added value of a salesman, and this is why we believe that upskilling the salesman in the dealership, namely training them and also explaining in what kind of dialogue this tool is to be used, how the needs discovery of the client is to be done before, but also the argumentation behind this is to be done. And we believe that the combination of both really is a very strong package. As a matter of fact, we in EuroFleet Consult are strong believers of the role of the dealership, the role also of the salesman in the dealership, in order to make a very sustainable proposition to fleet customers today, but also in the future. As I said before, the different parameters are constantly updated. So this means that the solution is always as accurate and as up to date as it is possible. Behind this also sits obviously a suite to make sure that GDPR is covered, that all the juridical requirements are covered in a very proper, in a very correct way, as we always, as is our standard within EuroFleet Consult to maintain. We use our own development team, which makes that we are very short. We have very short reaction times to any suggestion or any ideas or remarks that come from our user group. We constantly keep on developing. We are ready today with the Belgian fiscal environment for passenger cars for LCVs. We are also ready to go to market for the French market, and we are preparing further markets to be investigated. The whole program runs on Microsoft Azure, which obviously makes it very stable to use, very efficient also to further upscale when needed. There's dedicated help desks behind it, meaning that the users can always have a point of reference when it is needed. All the calculations that are done, or for all the calculations that are done, we're also able to provide very insightful information, either for the dealer, for the user, or also for the manufacturer or the importer, as and if they want to see it, and obviously if this fits the juridical requirements. But this level of business intelligence is also an important windfall of this usage, meaning that in many cases also price discussions can be, rebate discussions, price discussions are very little effective if you compare it to a real TCO based discussion. On the next slide, there's some other basic facts about the tool that we've been working on. So just again a summary, it's a simulation tool, it's a TCO simulation tool, and that we've essentially built for sales teams of the OEMs, the importers or NSEs and the dealers. It's not a configuration tool. We always start from an available configuration of vehicles. Our architecture is very open and very flexible, meaning that if there would be a need to integrate with the configuration tool or with the financial simulation tool, that can obviously be investigated. It is a SaaS application, meaning that it runs on all the current operating systems. We've always worked on covering 90 or 95% of the B2B use cases, and we are very confident that we've done this in a very efficient way, in a very simple way, and in a very intuitive way. The rollout has started in the Belgian market. We are ready to go to market in France in the first quarter of 2020. Further markets, as I said, are under development. I think the last slides are just a few slides about us, Steven, so that people can refer back to. Not only it's not about me, but it's about our whole fine team in EuroFleet Consult. We are a fine group of over 20 very skilled and very qualified senior trainers. As I said, we work in our headquarters is in Brussels. We also work in France. We're very proud of our teams in France. We're very proud of our teams in Italy. We're also very proud of all the people supporting us in Luxembourg, in Holland as well. We do this essentially. Our core competence really lies in in training, in coaching, and the sales teams of the manufacturers, the OEMs, and the dealerships. And if I look at the training sessions that we deploy, we excel in the human-to-human interaction, from the needs discovery in the H2H, in the human-to-human interaction. We enable our participants to offer really the right solution to their clients. That's what we have been doing in the last 20 years, and we at EuroFleet Consult, we are very proud that the car cost advisory that we've presented to you now very shortly is also another important milestone for the development of our company. The last slide is showing where you can find us. We are moving next week. We will stay in the Brussels area. We will move from Zaventem to Vilvoorde, so that we will sit a lot more close to our IT development team. In Vilvoorde, we will sit one floor down from them. We are really looking forward to that. Our telephone number and our email address is also up here. So if you want to reach out to us, we will be happy to respond. Stephen, I think this is about my half hour that we wanted to reach. So I think it's over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Wacht. Thank you for the presentation, giving insight into your car cost advisor and how sales people can better select and find the right company car for the fleet driver. We have now some time for Q&A with Wacht. So for the participants in this webinar, you can ask your question to Wacht Martens, Managing Partner at EuroFleet Consult, and you can do that by sending your question with the question tab in your webinar tool. So just send your question, and then I will select the most interesting and pertinent ones and ask them to Wacht. We already have a few questions that popped in during the webinar, which is always good. Let me have a look at my screen. Wacht, a question about the profiling of the driver.
Yes.
At the moment, if we understand correctly, the profiling, let's say, is based on not really perhaps the actual profile. It's to say, for example, if I'm driving 20,000 miles a year, but I'm doing that mainly on highways, mainly in city centers, this could, of course, a little bit impact my TCO and perhaps also in the comparison between a diesel, a petrol, or an electric vehicle. Is this something that you are planning into taking into account, or can you a little bit elaborate on that, on how do you use the actual profiling?
Yeah, thank you very much, Steven, for bringing that up. That is indeed a very valid point that also our project team is very aware of. We know that that the question level that we have today is not sufficient. Well, at least not to our standards. It's not sufficient. We first of all, in our MVP that we started with, we want to have a reference base for making a decision based on the prospective TCO. So on the TCO that you can expect based on the dynamic parameters that you have entered. Now, if you look at engine types that go more into the hybrid area or that go into the CNG area, we know that the differences, the differences between the homologation fuel consumptions and the real fuel consumptions, that these are really made based on the actual usage. So as you've been saying, if you would be a driver that has long mileage or a lot of highway use, you would have obviously different fuel emission results from your hybrid vehicle compared with your diesel vehicle. And that is something that we are due to refine. Also the patterns of the charging patterns and also the different kinds of electricity pricing behind the driving patterns. is something that that we have up our planning for the next few weeks, Steve.
Okay, good. Another very practical question. France will be the next country where you will go live. You mentioned Q1. Will it be closer to January or closer to March?
Well, as the fiscal changes will become effective in January, well, it is ready to do, but we first want to have all the contents of the fiscal changes that will become effective to be implemented and tested. But I'm very confident that it will be rather in the first half of the quarter than in the second half of the quarter.
Okay.
Yes. We know, by the way, we know that the year 2020 overall will be a very important one for managing right the level of CO2 emissions from the vehicles sold. So therefore, the push for us is definitely to make sure that all these kind of things can be done as early as possible.
Okay, you are already live in Belgium. If I'm now using the tool, does it already have all, let's say, the fiscal elements that are counting for 2020?
For sure.
Okay, so that already has been updated and included in...
Yeah.
Okay.
That was in a very early beta phase. We were already able to implement the new deductibility rules, for instance, for the passenger cars. Those have been in from very early in the project. The index values for CO2 for the CO2 contribution. So the benefit in kind and the benefit in kind, they are already implemented. Because these will change in January. They still have to be officially communicated, but there was already information about that. And then when the other changes will evolve later in the year, because for the regional taxes, these evolve in July time. That is also the moment where we update.
Okay, then the business model. There are a few questions related to what is the business model behind? Is that subscription by year? Is it by sales guys? How does it work?
We have we have a license-based. We work with a license base. The license base is basically a yearly contribution that we have. However, for us is also important that that before a salesperson or a user starts using the application, that we also can make the user very aware of the right questions to ask and the right way in which the tool should be used. And therefore, before starting or giving access to the tool, there is at least half a day or 1 day additional update of fiscal news and then the fiscal regime. It's not really a fiscal masterclass, because we try to refrain a little bit from that, but we really highlight and we really give to the attention of the participants we highlight what really is the activity that we are doing here. I mean, we are evolving away from a sales discussion that is based on rebates, and we are extending that to offering TCO, really without saying what the complexity of TCO is. But this requires really that the user, that the salesman in the showroom or the fleet salesman is aware of what the right kind of questions is to be answered before, and also how it is to be used afterwards. So to come down to your question, Steven, for the moment we work with a license base, and the license always comes with half a day or 1 day training or coaching for the.
Okay. When are you thinking about Spain? Because there are some questions about the Spanish market.
We are constantly thinking. That's our nature of our business, and it's also my personal nature. we have a few markets up our sleeve. We have Italy up our sleeve. We have Spain up our sleeve. We have Germany up our sleeve. However, we have not yet prioritized when we will tackle which market. So I am eagerly looking forward also to more discussions or more insights on the market developments there.
Okay. Does your tool also allow to have a total fleet TCO, or is it really via the individual cars?
No, I've not shown this because this is something that we will have ready in the first quarter of 2020 for the Belgian market. We will indeed enable also a complete TCO analysis for an existing fleet.
Okay. The tool at this moment is not, let's say, giving the lease rates of the leasing company. Is there a possibility that I, for example, as a customer, I can include my lease rates in your tool, or that your tool can be linked, let's say, to some of the calculations of the various leasing companies?
Well, first of all, as I said, in order to make sure that the calculation is done properly, we always need to have as a starting base a monthly lease rate, or an indication of the monthly lease rate that is obtained from a quotation of the leasing company or the financing company. Okay. That's number one. Number two, our architecture is an open architecture, meaning if there is a demand to create interfaces with third parties, that is technically feasible.
Okay, very good. A final question is related to the name, let's say, or how do you say it? A little bit the business that you have. So it's Car Cost Advisor. So it's passenger cars and light commercial vehicles. Is there an intention to also develop, for example, a mobility cost advisor? Because some partners can perhaps also offer nice things on two wheels, or I don't know.
We are. I know that with the work that we have done, we are at the start of quite a large journey. And that journey will have different phases. Indeed, one of the first phase is to have the complete TCO picture of a fleet. We know also that TCO is not only the ownership of vehicles, so passenger cars and LCVs. We know that there is also other forms of mobility behind it, especially looking at the Belgian market. We have another challenge to be tackled quite soon, which is the mobility budget, which indeed already reaches out into different elements of the mobility basket to make sure that the employees can remain mobile. So it's definitely something, Steven, that we have up our planning for the next months to also include that. Yeah.
Okay, and if that's ready, then perhaps we can organize another session. Thank you very much, Wart Martens of EuroFleet Consult. Unfortunately, we have to end the webinar here. As you can see on the screen, there will be a recorded version of this webinar, so you can relive the webinar afterwards, and we will publish it on our website, fleeteurope.com. You will also receive a short satisfaction survey with a few questions, and we hope that you can answer them, send it back, because we always are looking to improve further initiatives with Fleet Europe. And so we hope to meet with you again in an upcoming webinar or an event of our company. Thank you very much and have a great day. Bye-bye.